Everyone has been watching the footage. Nobody is asking why the investigation was built to fail from the very beginning. That changes today. It is day 65. Nancy Guthrie is still missing. The question this video is asking is not who took her, it is why, after 65 days, with DNA in a lab and genetic genealogy testing already underway, not a single person has been charged. Consider what investigators actually have. An unknown male DNA profile recovered from a pair of gloves found approximately 2 miles from Nancy's home gloves that appear to match the type worn by the armed, masked man seen on her doorbell camera. A suspect description confirmed by the FBI. Male 5'9" to 5'10", average build, black mustache. A 25-liter Ozark Trail hiker pack on his back. A firearm positioned in a holster in a location that analysts reviewing the footage have flagged as highly unusual. The FBI has processed more than 13,000 tips. Surveillance images were released personally by FBI Director Kash Patel. A neighborhood canvass requested footage going all the way back to January 1st. No arrest. No named suspect. Day 65. One correction first, because most outlets are still getting this wrong. Nancy Guthrie did not disappear on February 1st, 2026. The 84-year-old was last seen the evening before, 9:48 in the evening, January 31st, dropped off at her home in Catalina Foothills, north of Tucson, Arizona, after a family dinner at her daughter Annie's house. February 1st is the day she was reported missing after she did not show up to watch an online church service at a friend's house around noon. That distinction matters for understanding what was happening inside that home in the hours no one was watching. The doorbell camera at her front door disconnected at 1:47 in the morning. Her pacemaker stopped syncing with her Apple devices at 2:28 in the morning. A 41-minute window. Inside that window, at 2:12 in the morning, the camera software detected a person. No video was captured. Just a motion detection. What happened inside those 41 minutes has never been fully explained. Blood on the front porch tested positive for her DNA. The back doors of the house were found propped open. Sheriff Nanos of Pima County stated it plainly. She did not leave on her own. This was a kidnapping. That conclusion has not changed. What almost no one is connecting is the growing evidence that the investigation itself may have been damaged before it ever really began. There is one specific detail about how this case was staffed in the critical early hours that has received almost no serious attention from anyone covering this story. It does not involve the suspect. It involves the people assigned to find him. And it may explain more about where this investigation stands today than any single piece of physical evidence. If this channel is new to you, subscribe now. We are tracking this case until someone is charged. Because 65 days without an arrest is not just a mystery. It is a pattern. And patterns have explanations. The man on that doorbell footage made a specific error. Not a careless one. A revealing one. The firearm he was carrying was not in a standard holster position. It was positioned near his groin, not at the hip, not at the chest, not in any configuration consistent with trained firearm handling. The FBI noted this in their public description. Almost no one has discussed what it means. A person who knows how to carry a weapon does not carry it that way. A person unfamiliar with firearms or deliberately disguising the shape of what they are carrying might. That distinction matters, because it tells us something about the category of person we are looking for. He also knew exactly which plant to use. When the doorbell camera would not come off the wall with light taps, the man reached into a potted plant on the front porch and pulled out a branch to cover the lens. He knew that plant was there, not because he glanced around in the moment, because he had looked before. There was one detail investigators kept returning to, and Sheriff Nanos eventually confirmed it to a local Tucson station. Not in a national press conference, which is the kind of statement that tends to get missed. He said investigators now believe something may have happened weeks before Nancy Guthrie vanished. Not days, weeks. That word is doing a lot of work. If the kidnapping was executed on the night of January 31st, the planning may have begun weeks earlier. Someone was in that neighborhood, learning a schedule, checking sightlines, identifying camera positions and which potted plants sat near which lenses. The FBI recovered images from 3 separate cameras on Nancy's property, the doorbell, a camera over the driveway, and one in the backyard. The images reportedly showed nothing considered suspicious in the days and weeks leading up to her disappearance, not the night of, which means investigators have a visual record of what that property looked like before February 1st, and they are not releasing it. They are not saying those images show a known face. They are not saying those images are useless. They are saying the analysis is ongoing. In this investigation, that specific silence is a choice. One person has spoken more directly than anyone else about what went wrong in the hours after Nancy was reported missing. Jennifer Coffindaffer is not a cable news commentator offering general observations about a case she read about online. She spent years as a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation working cases that required exactly the kind of multi-agency coordination and forensic sequencing that a kidnapping of this complexity demands. She has been tracking the Guthrie case from the first public report. When she says something went wrong, she is measuring it against a standard she was trained to meet. Coffindaffer stated this publicly: "There are no crime scene do-overs. The first 48 hours of this investigation cannot be recovered. Early mistakes," she said, "will impact both the search for Nancy and the ability to successfully prosecute whoever took her." She referred to the masked man in the footage as Porch Guy, and she wrote that Porch Guy walks free. Not walked, walks. That is the present tense. On day 65. Now here's the detail that connects everything, and it is the one this video exists to examine. According to Fox News Digital, the lead investigator assigned to the Nancy Guthrie case had no homicide experience. That is a single source report and has not been independently confirmed, but it has also not been denied. And when you place it alongside everything Coffindaffer described the unrecoverable early hours, the damage potential for prosecution, the absence of any public arrest, a specific question becomes unavoidable. Who decided that a case involving a missing 84-year-old woman, blood on her porch, a masked armed intruder on camera, and ransom demands worth millions of dollars should be led by someone with no experience in the kind of investigation it immediately required? The Pima County Board of Supervisors has voted unanimously to question Sheriff Chris Nanos about his management of the department. A recall effort is underway. These are not procedural formalities. They are institutional responses to a specific pattern of failure. More than 13,000 tips reviewed. 400 investigators working around the clock at the height of the operation. Cadaver dogs deployed, then stood down. The investigation has now transitioned to a smaller focused task force. No charge, no name. Day 65. But there is something specific. The FBI did one operational step that most coverage has mentioned and then moved past without examining what it actually means. They authorized the search of a specific address, approximately 2 miles from Nancy's home. A federal search does not happen on instinct. Someone had to establish sufficient probable cause before a judge. And the address they went to was approximately 2 miles away. That number has appeared before in this case. The gloves, the ones containing an unknown male DNA profile, the ones that appear to match what Porch Guy was wearing, were found approximately 2 miles from Nancy's home. Not at the scene. 2 miles away, in the direction of somewhere. A vehicle was reportedly captured on a Ring camera, approximately 2.5 miles from the home at approximately 2 in the morning on February 1st, according to a single source report from News Nation. That vehicle has never been publicly identified or connected to the case. 3 separate data points. 3 locations measured in the same unit, all within the same radius. The home the FBI searched belonged to a 37-year-old man with a prior criminal conviction on drug-related charges. His attorney confirmed that his client was the specific target of the operation. His attorney also confirmed that his client and his client's mother, 77 years old, were detained, their home was searched, and both were released. No arrest was made. Sources briefed on the investigation later told ABC News that investigators were leaning away from that individual as a suspect. Sheriff Nanos offered his own qualifier. Nobody is fully cleared until the kidnapper is in custody. Those two statements are not the same thing. Leaning away is not cleared. Leaning away means he was close enough to a pattern to warrant a federal search, and the investigation is still looking for the explanation that fits the evidence. Now consider the 2-mile radius as a whole. The dropped gloves carrying male DNA with no match in the National Criminal Database. The home of a man with a criminal record that the FBI deemed significant enough to search on probable cause. And a vehicle seen moving through the dark at approximately 2 in the morning, in a direction no one has publicly named. The FBI is currently conducting investigative genetic genealogy on the DNA profile recovered from those gloves. This is the same method that identified the Golden State Killer after more than 4 decades. It does not require the suspect to have a prior criminal record. It builds outward from the DNA sample through publicly available genealogy databases, working through distant relatives until it narrows to a specific individual. If that process has already produced a name, the FBI has not said so. If it has not yet produced a name, the FBI has not said that either. What they have said through Sheriff Nanos publicly, to NBC News, is that the suspect in this case could absolutely strike again. That there is a danger to the public. The The combined reward in this case is now over $1.2 million. $1 million from Nancy's family, payable only for her recovery. $100,000 from the FBI. More than $100,000 from 8/8 crime. If you have seen anything unusual in the Catalina Foothills area in the weeks around late January 2026, share this video now. That reward is waiting for the right person, watching the right screen at the right moment. The 2-mile corridor raises a question that neither the search of that home nor the genetic genealogy testing has publicly answered. The gloves are approximately 2 miles from the scene. The searched house is approximately 2 miles from the scene. If Porch Guy moved through that specific stretch of Tucson in the early morning hours of February, first on foot or by vehicle, where was he coming from, and where was he going next? Before we get to what the DNA testing may or may not have already produced, there is a detail about the hour before the camera went dark that almost no coverage has examined with any precision. A utility box near Nancy's home showed signs of tampering. There was reportedly some kind of power or internet disruption that morning. The doorbell camera disconnected at 1:47 in the morning. These three things occupy the same timeline. And in a kidnapping that investigators believe was planned weeks in advance, sequences like that are rarely accidental. The gloves did not fall out of a pocket. Someone took them off. That is the detail investigators blinked past, and it changes what the 2-mile radius actually represents. A person removing gloves after an operation is a deliberate act. It means the gloves came off somewhere between the house and wherever Porch Guy was going. It means there is a direction. And the fact that those gloves contained a usable male DNA profile means one of two things. Either Porch Guy did not know his DNA was inside them, or he believed no database would ever match it. Neither of those possibilities points to a casual offender. Consider what this operation required before February 1st even arrived. The Catalina Foothills neighborhood is quiet, residential, not heavily trafficked at 2 in the morning. A stranger moving through it on foot, masked, armed, carrying a backpack would be visible to anyone still awake. Which means Porch Guy either knew the neighborhood well enough to move through it without being noticed, or he had identified the specific window when no one would be watching. Both of those require prior presence. Sheriff Nanos confirmed to a local Tucson station that investigators believe something may have happened in the weeks before Nancy's disappearance. That is not a throwaway line. Law enforcement does not typically surface that kind of operational detail unless the evidence of prior activity is concrete enough to matter to the investigation. It means someone was likely in that neighborhood before January 31st. Not once. Possibly multiple times. The utility box near Nancy's home had signs of tampering. That detail was confirmed by the Pima County Sheriff's Department. What was not confirmed is whether that tampering is connected to the case. But the timing sits inside the same window. A utility box that controls local power or internet connectivity, showing signs of interference, in the same neighborhood where an 84-year-old woman was abducted in the middle of the night and investigators have not ruled it out. The doorbell camera disconnected at 1:47 in the morning. Not destroyed, not removed, disconnected. The FBI still recovered data from it, which means the device itself was not physically compromised. What failed was the connection. And in the 25 minutes between the camera going dark and the motion detection logging a presence at 2:12 in the morning, something moved on that property without being recorded. If the utility box disruption preceded the camera disconnection, even by minutes, the sequence becomes a protocol. Step 1. Reduce the signal. Step 2. Approach the door. Step 3. Cover whatever camera survives. This is not improvisation. This is a checklist. There is one additional piece of evidence that almost no coverage has examined in the context of reconnaissance. The ransom notes received by TMZ and 2 Tucson television stations contain specific details about Nancy's home and what she was wearing on the night she disappeared. Investigators took those notes seriously enough to review them and share them with the FBI. The notes reportedly contained information that someone who had never been inside or near that property would be unlikely to know. The FBI has not verified the identity of whoever sent those notes. They have also not dismissed them. Savannah Guthrie said publicly that she believes 2 of them are legitimate. If the notes are legitimate, and that remains unconfirmed, then the person who wrote them had access to information that required either direct observation or direct presence. The clothing detail alone narrows the field. Nancy was dropped off at 9:48 in the evening in whatever she wore to dinner at Annie's house. The number of people who knew what she was wearing that specific night is small. That is the open question that sits underneath the ransom note evidence. If the sender knew what she was wearing, how did they know? And does the answer to that question connect to the weeks of prior activity investigators now believe occurred? The investigation has never answered that publicly. What it has answered is this. The DNA recovered inside Nancy's home also yielded no match in the National Criminal Database. Not just the gloves. The inside of the home as well. 2 separate DNA samples. 2 separate dead ends in CODIS. Which means, investigative genetic genealogy, the method running right now, is not a backup option. It is the primary path forward, and it takes time. The process works by uploading an unknown DNA profile to publicly available genealogy databases and identifying potential relatives. From there, investigators build out a family tree, sometimes going back generations until they isolate a specific individual who fits the physical profile and geographic location. It has solved cases that had gone cold for decades, but it does not produce results overnight. And while it runs, the FBI says nothing. They are not saying the genealogy search has returned a candidate. They are not saying it has returned nothing. The analysis is ongoing. In a case where an 84-year-old woman has been missing for 65 days, that silence is not procedural caution. It is the loudest thing happening in this investigation right now. Before this video reaches the evidence that may change how you understand everything else, there is something that needs to be said about Nancy Guthrie as a person, because in the volume of daily updates and press conferences and tip line statistics, it becomes possible to forget. She went to her daughter Annie's house on the evening of January 31st for dinner. They played games. She was driven home afterward. She walked through her garage door at 9:48 in the evening, and the door closed 2 minutes later. She had staff. She had family nearby. She had a life that was full. And somewhere between that garage door closing and the next morning, someone entered her home and took her in her pajamas. No shoes. No medication she depended on daily to survive. Savannah Guthrie said she imagines her mother's terror every single night. One word in the comments does not change what happened in Catalina Foothills on February 1st, but it is a reminder to Nancy's family and to everyone watching that she is not a case number. If you are praying for her today, leave that below. Even just amen. Even just praying. Because she was someone's mother before she was ever a headline. The investigation that is supposed to bring her home has been running for 65 days without a public arrest. And in the last 2 weeks, 2 separate developments have emerged that have received almost no serious analysis together. The first is the confirmation that the lead investigator on this case reportedly had no homicide experience, according to Fox News Digital. The second is what Sheriff Nanos told investigators to start looking at, and when he believes the operation against Nancy actually began. Those 2 threads lead to the same place, and that is exactly where this case is about to go. Here is what we know with certainty, and here is what remains reported but unconfirmed, because you deserve to know the difference. Confirmed. Nancy Guthrie, 84 years old, was last seen at 9:48 in the evening on January 31st, 2026. Confirmed. The doorbell camera disconnected at 1:47 in the morning. Confirmed. Camera software detected a person on the property at 2:12 in the morning. No video was captured. Confirmed. Her pacemaker stopped syncing with her Apple devices at 2:28 in the morning. Confirmed. Blood on the front porch tested positive for her DNA. Confirmed. The back doors were found propped open. Confirmed. A male DNA profile recovered from gloves found approximately 2 miles away returned no match in the National Criminal Database, and investigative genetic genealogy is now underway. Confirmed. A 37-year-old man with a prior drug conviction, living approximately 2 miles from Nancy's home, had his residence searched on February 13th. He was detained and released, and sources, briefed on the investigation, told ABC News that investigators were leaning away from him as a suspect, though Sheriff Nanos stated publicly that no one is fully cleared until the kidnapper is in custody. Reported but not independently confirmed. According to Fox News Digital, the lead investigator assigned to this case had no homicide experience. That report has not been verified by a second source. It has also not been denied. Reported but not independently confirmed. A vehicle was captured on a Ring camera approximately 2.5 miles from Nancy's home at approximately 2 in the morning on February 1st, according to a single source report from News Nation. Law enforcement has not confirmed or denied that detail. Now hold those 3 confirmed timestamps together. 1:47 in the morning, the camera disconnects. 2:12 in the morning, the camera software detects a person, no video. 2:28 in the morning, the pacemaker stops syncing. 25 minutes after the camera went dark, someone was on that property. The device knew it. The recording did not capture it. And 16 minutes after that logged presence, Nancy's pacemaker went silent. That 41-minute window is not the period when she disappeared into the unknown. It is the period when someone was with her, present, inside the perimeter of her home. After the camera was already neutralized, now the back doors. They were found propped open, not forced, not broken, propped. That is a deliberate act. A prop door is held open either to allow movement in or movement out, or both. The front of the house had a camera. The back did not capture anything of evidentiary value that night. If porch guy arrived at the front to handle the camera, and the back doors were propped open from the inside or in advance, then the front door approach was preparation, not entry. Sheriff Nanos stated publicly that investigators have not ruled out the possibility that more than one person was involved in the abduction of Nancy Guthrie. That statement was made and never walked back. If there were two people, one approaching the front, one already positioned at the back, the 41-minute window becomes a coordination window, not a waiting window. And the 2-mile corridor, which tracks a single route away from the scene, may represent only one of two departure paths. Former FBI Special Agent Jennifer Coffindaffer has been clear on this case from the beginning. She is not a television personality offering impressions. She is someone who has worked federal kidnapping investigations at the level of complexity this case demands. She wrote publicly that early law enforcement errors in this investigation were devastating to the search for Nancy and to the future prosecution of whoever took her. She called the masked man porch guy. She said he walks free, present tense, and she asked what was stopping him from doing this again. Sheriff Nanos has already answered that question. Nothing is stopping him. That is the exact implication of his public warning that the suspect could absolutely strike again. Now look at the back door one more time, propped open. Nancy's shoes still inside, her medication still on the counter. She was taken in her pajamas in the middle of the night by someone or more than one someone who did not need to take anything from that house except her. If you are watching the released footage right now, porch guy at the front door, reaching into the potted plant, covering the lens, ask yourself one question. Was porch guy the person who came through the front? Or was porch guy a distraction while someone else was already inside? The front camera captured what it captured. The back of that house, in the dark, at 2 in the morning, has never been explained. That question has no official answer. Drop your theory below, because the propped back door is the one detail in this case that no press conference has ever addressed directly. Subscribe to Cold Case Files USA and hit the bell. When the next update on this case drops, you need to be here. Day 65. Here is where this investigation actually stands. The Pima County Sheriff's Department and the FBI are both describing this as active. The department has said it will continue until Nancy Guthrie is located or all leads are exhausted. The shift from 400 investigators working around the clock to a smaller focused task force is framed as a normal phase transition. Sheriff Nanos has said it is not cold. The cadaver dogs have been stood down. The large-scale neighborhood canvass has concluded. The daily briefings stopped weeks ago. The DNA from the gloves found approximately 2 miles from the home has no match in CODIS, a database containing more than 20 million criminal profiles. Investigative genetic genealogy is running. The FBI confirmed that. They have not confirmed what it has returned. They have not confirmed it has returned nothing. The analysis, they say, is ongoing. They are not saying a name has emerged from the genealogy search. They are not saying the process has narrowed toward a specific individual. They are not saying it has stalled. They are saying the analysis continues. And in a case where the primary physical evidence linking a potential suspect to this crime is an unidentified DNA profile, that silence has a specific shape. Investigative genetic genealogy does not announce itself when it finds a candidate. It works quietly until it produces something actionable, and then investigators build around that result before they move. If they are already building, 65 days of silence is not failure, it is preparation. Nancy Guthrie had a garage door that opened and closed in the same sequence every time she came home. She had a potted plant on her front porch that she had placed there herself. She had a pacemaker monitoring her heart and transmitting its rhythm to the devices she carried. She left for dinner on the evening of January 31st. She came back 9:48 in the evening, garage door opening, garage door closing 2 minutes later. She came back to her own home. She had dinner with her daughter Annie. They played games. And before the sun came up, someone walked into that home and took her in her pajamas without her shoes and without the medication she needed to survive every 24 hours. Her family offered $1 million for her recovery. Not for information, not for a suspect, for her. That word recovery is still waiting on day 65 to mean something. Two questions have no official answer. The first, what specifically happened in the weeks before January 31st? Nanos confirmed to a local Tucson station that investigators believe something occurred during that prior period. He did not say what. No public reporting has pressed that detail into the open. If Porch Guy was in that neighborhood before the night of the abduction, casing the property, learning the schedule, identifying the camera positions, there may be footage somewhere in the Catalina Foothills area that places him there before February 1st. The family's statement on March 21st asked the community directly. No detail is too small. Any footage, any observation, anything out of the ordinary between January 1st and February 2nd. That window is still open. The second, has investigative genetic genealogy already produced a candidate? The process that identified the Golden State Killer after more than 4 decades does not require a prior criminal record. It builds from a DNA sample outward, through family trees until it isolates a specific person. When it works, law enforcement does not announce the result immediately. They verify. They investigate the candidate quietly. They build a case that will hold. If that process is already past the identification stage and into the verification stage, the silence of the last 65 days is not evidence of failure. It is evidence of patience. They are not saying they have a name. They are not saying they do not have a name. They are saying nothing. And in this investigation, on day 65, that specific nothing is the most significant thing happening right now. Someone planned that night for weeks, and Nancy's home gave them everything they needed to do it. That is the hardest part of what this case reveals. Not the masked figure at the door, not the ransom notes, the weeks before, the reconnaissance, the patience. Because if someone spent weeks observing that property before February 1st, they were looking for exactly the vulnerabilities that exist in almost every home where an elderly person lives alone. And those vulnerabilities are not hidden. They are visible from the street. Doorbell cameras with cloud backup are significantly harder to neutralize than those that store locally. The FBI recovered data from Nancy's camera, despite the lens being covered because the device had already transmitted. If you have a doorbell camera that does not back up in real time to a cloud server, that footage can be erased or lost the moment the device is physically compromised. Check that setting today, not this week, today. Utility boxes that control local internet or power connectivity are almost always accessible from outside the home. In the Nancy Guthrie case, a utility box near her property showed signs of tampering. Most homeowners have never looked at those boxes. Most people do not know where they are. Find yours. Know what it controls. If it shows signs of interference, that is a reportable incident, not a maintenance call. For elderly family members living alone, the single most protective change is not a camera or a lock. It is a predictable check-in structure, with a short response window. Nancy was not reported missing until noon on February 1st, more than 10 hours after her pacemaker stopped syncing. A structured check-in with a window of 60 to 90 minutes would not have prevented what happened, but it compresses the response time. In cases where a person is taken for ransom and is still alive, the first hours are the most critical window for intervention. Report the anomalous, not just the criminal. The Pima County Sheriff's Department asked residents within 2 miles of Nancy's home to submit any footage from January 1st through February 2nd that seemed out of the ordinary. Not footage of a crime, footage of anything that did not fit. A car parked too long, a person walking a route without purpose, someone looking at a house who did not knock. Reconnaissance looks like nothing until it looks like everything. If you notice something in the Catalina Foothills area during that window and have not reported it, the tip line is still active. Call 1-800-CALL-FBI. The reward stands at over $1.2 million. The families of elderly people living alone carry a specific kind of fear that this case has made impossible to ignore. The question is not whether to act. The question is which action closes which window first. We opened this video with a specific question. Not who is Porch Guy, not what the ransom notes say. The question was this. With DNA in a lab, genetic genealogy testing underway, and a confirmed search of a residence approximately 2 miles from the scene, why has no one been charged after 65 days? The honest answer is that we do not know. What we know is that investigative genetic genealogy does not announce itself. What we know is that federal search warrants require probable cause. What we know is that Sheriff Nanos said investigators are definitely closer. What we know is that the FBI has not walked away. Cold Case Files USA will be here the moment that changes. Subscribe and hit the bell not as a formality, but because this case is not finished. When the next development breaks, you will want to already be here. One question before you go, and it is a question no press conference has answered. If the back doors were propped open from the inside on the night Nancy disappeared, who opened them, and when? The DNA is in a lab. The back door has no explanation, and Nancy Guthrie is still missing.